Today, we're going to share with you an overview of the Hope Corps project and details about the grant itself. I'm Kate Fernandez. I'm the project manager for the project, and I'm joined with my colleague,
Alex Rose. I'm the Partnerships Program Manager here at the Office of Arts and Culture. So to give you a little background, this program has been around since 2021. And Hope Corps was really born out of this moment in the pandemic where we experienced a loss of work, the ability to work, the ability to generate an income, all of a sudden disappeared in the midst of the pandemic. So Hope Corps was really conceived as a way to put creative workers to work in service of the public. I don't have to tell you all that most creative workers are non-traditional workers, and so there was difficulty accessing unemployment benefits. We've seen a cultural brain drain where folks have had to leave Seattle or leave the creative sector, and creatives of color have been disproportionately impacted by these barriers. So since 2021, we have benefited from nearly $4 million in one-time investments. And really that just means that this program is not guaranteed funding every year, but it has been funded sort of on an ad hoc basis every year since 2021. And since then, there have been more than 200 creative workers that have been part of this program, who have gotten meaningful employment and have engaged with their communities to present their work or practice their craft. We have a community of practice that's part of Hope Corps, and that intention behind that is really so that this is a shared experience, that grantees can get to know one another, can exchange information, and really have an opportunity to advance their careers together. And we at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture will bring in folks to run workshops for this community of practice or host gatherings that are meant to be social. So in addition to the funding, there is this sort of social benefit as well. Social and professional benefit, I should say. To give you a sense of what has been funded in the past, we have seen a number of free workshops across different arts disciplines, different traditional cultural practices. We have seen grantees capture community narratives through various means, illustrated books, paintings, podcasts. We've had murals, most recently, that have been painted in parks throughout the city and are going up downtown as we speak. So something to note here is that for this particular funding cycle, for projects that will be supported in 2025, no mural projects will be eligible for this funding, for this current funding cycle.
So this year, 2024, the focus of the grant funds will focus on downtown activation. And that's so that we can closely align with Mayor Harrell's downtown activation plan that seeks to identify it downtown as a location where residents, workers, and visitors want to spend time. We've identified $700,000 in funding, and we anticipate that funding to be awarded in levels that range from $5,000 to $50,000. This could look like about 20 projects, but this is really just an estimation that kind of takes into consideration a broad range of funding levels that are both sought out and awarded. The project itself, the funding cycle itself, is also specifically looking at key areas downtown. That's the Belltown, Central Downtown, Chinatown, International District, Denny Triangle, and Pioneer Square, and Stadium districts. And these priority zones, corridors were developed just in consultation with the other work that's happening in and around the downtown area in the coming year. There will be a lot of funding and investment from multiple groups around downtown. For example, the Seattle Waterfront is also heavily investing in programming on the waterfront. And so we have weighted that kind of lower down on the priority scale, given that we anticipate there will be other activities happening. It, of course, does not preclude you from considering those areas in your plans and goals, but we know that the priority area one, that downtown Chinatown International District is kind of at the top priority of areas that we're looking at, followed by Denny Triangle and then the Stadium District and Belltown. To speak a little bit more about the downtown activation plan, and we'll pop a link in the chat to this just to provide some context about what the city of Seattle as a whole is looking at. The mayor's plan broadly is looking to make downtown safe and welcoming, as well transform it into this lively neighborhood where more people can afford to live. They're also seeking to create a unique downtown retail experience and make downtown a place where people want to work that reflects the future of our economy. They seek to celebrate downtown Seattle's arts, culture, sports, and entertainment sectors and make it a top destination for Seattleites and visitors year-round. And while on the whole, creating a healthy, resilient, and green downtown. I think one of the things that's interesting that we've been talking about at the office here is that, you know, this plan isn't just for tourists, but it is for those of us who live here. And reminding us that downtown is still on the map and is still a place that's for us and has offerings that we would seek out as part of our daily life. Another nuance of the grant funding cycle this year is a set of thematic areas or focus areas that any project should address. You can address one or more of them, but we are really striving to kind of thematically organize the projects as they are showcased in the coming year. So these topics include Seattle is thriving, creating a new narrative for downtown, and some just broad suggestions. Of course, this is up to you to interpret, but ideas about like how you showcase the life and vitality of the city. Why do you love it? What makes you feel safe? What is the history or experiences of survival in this place? It's also can be about change and pride, or those things that you want to see in the future. Second to that is placemaking, placekeeping, and belonging. Exploring who belongs here. What does it mean to be on Indigenous land? How do we live in community with others, including others who are unhoused, and who's been excluded from the opportunity to be a part of these neighborhoods, or what makes these neighborhoods unique, and our relationship in the arts to those places. The last theme or focus area is climate and water justice. Our location between the mountains and the sea is unique, and so how does nature and water influence our city and the environment that we live in, our identity and our relationship to it, and what does that mean for us as stewards, and more so, how can we help create a healthy, resilient, vital, green downtown? So those are the things. In terms of what we anticipate this year's projects to look at, we wanted to provide a sample kind of as a contrast to what has happened in the past, since this year really does focus on activation. So that does look more like a time-based event or experience. And this is really not meant to be an all-inclusive list. I'm sure there will be other versions of this, which we welcome your kind of questions around. But for example, that could include public performance, festivals, parades, block parties, pop-ups, markets, showcases of literary or other media, or other like one-time or repeat events that just bring people together in community, in public spaces or indoors. This could look like a free art exhibit or a theater production or a music production, or a combination of both. It can also look like workshops or classes or tours that take place. It does include temporary art installations, so that can be, in this case, we're looking for a minimum of a 3-month duration. And it can also include artists in residence of a similar duration.
Yeah.
We are seeking projects that are primarily in person, but projects can have a virtual component or exist virtually. For example, documentation around downtown or around projects that are going on in the area, audio, visual, or written documentation, historical records, or a walking tour as a reflection of these points. And then last, we are projects that are also eligible can be ones that sustain existing creative or educational research, or service work that's currently happening in these areas.
Yeah, reminder to put any questions in the chat as we go.
So last, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the additional support to grantees that this project also can offer you. Obviously, we want to see you succeed and use the sort of leverage and position that the city has to create or build connections that would further your work. So we can be a partner in helping to research and develop sites for your work if you're looking for something to happen in the public right of way, or within a space that needs further help developing a connection within. To that end, broadly, we strive to just help develop your network around your genre and work, and use our personal connections to broaden your network. We can also assist in navigating various documentation that might be necessary for your project, whether it's permitting at the city, making sure you have the right insurance for the conditions of your project, and even budgeting or creating partnership agreements with people that you may collaborate with under the funding umbrella. Throughout the period of the funding cycle, we can also work on just broad project documentation, approaches. We're not necessarily doing that documentation for you, but just supporting kind of knowledge building around that. And we do, as a practice for this funding cycle, which I think is unique to some grants of the city, develop a community of practice with the awardees, which becomes a cohort experience where together we learn from the work that we're doing, but also processes or skills that are relevant at the point in time in which the work is happening. So in the past, that's looked like tax guidance on tax paperwork, or project documentation, or
social media marketing for your project.
Yeah, so it's an organic process, but one that you have the option to participate in as a member of the cohort in 2025.
Yeah, I see a question from Bailey. Are projects required to be free? We're about to get into some of the specifics around, what the funding can support. So good question. I'll say that there has to be a free option. So the intention behind this downtown activation funding is that it's providing opportunities for the public to engage in arts and cultural experiences downtown. So if it is something like a ticketed event, you'll want to explain to our selection panel how you're going to make it accessible to the public. And so this is, again, visitors, residents, passersby. So I think if you want to talk through specifics of what you're thinking, we'll definitely be available for some of that kind of one-on-one consulting time to really kind of hash out what that accessibility piece of your proposal might look like. So hopefully that helps. So speaking of money, this is an overview of sort of the funding categories. We have small, medium, and large sort of award categories. And again, starting at $5,000 and going up to $50,000. We have this framework as a guide. This isn't meant to be a rigid restriction on what you can apply for, but we want to see that your project is supporting creative workers primarily, and that, again, you're providing publicly available programming. So we've kind of come up with these suggestions or guides to help you choose a funding level that is appropriate for your project. So if you're going for that large award amount, you'll want to show that you're supporting more creative workers. Or if maybe it's a very large activation that will support a smaller number of creative workers over a longer period of time. These are the kind of things that you'll want to explain in your application. Let's see. Are you planning to help performance organizations find suitable venues for performances that are located downtown? Yeah, like Kate mentioned, beyond the funding, we do intend to support general execution of these projects. And so while we may not be like negotiating with a property owner, we can help, point you towards some ideas that might be a good fit for your project. Are short films eligible? Can you say more about the short film? I'm thinking if you're presenting a short film that's available to the public, that's yes. If you're creating a short film, perhaps you will have a culminating presentation of that short film, or otherwise, involve folks downtown in the filming. So maybe we should talk a little bit more about that. But it's not off the table. I'll just say that. How does the funding level work for organizations? So these funding levels are available to all applicants, whether you're an individual, an artist collective, or a formal 501c3. We do know that it takes money to run, to do the organizing and the project management. So in the case of an organization that might propose a project, when you're explaining your budget, you can say, this percentage or this dollar amount will be going towards project management, towards our staff hours or something like that. What we can't do, though, and I think that's maybe on the next slide, is we won't be just sort of funding organizational costs. We want to see downtown activations that are, available to the public, which may be an extension of your existing programming or what have you. But hopefully that helps. Okay, so just want to cover a couple more things on this slide, and then I'll move back to the questions. But one thing to note here is that, again, we want to be compensating artists fairly. We have calculated that a living wage is the equivalent of $32 an hour. And so you'll want to factor that in. You might not be currently able to pay that that hourly wage, but this grant is intended to, again, get creative workers working and compensate them for their time. So if you have, students or youth who may be part of your project, there are exceptions. They may not qualify for the $32 an hour minimum, so to speak, but this is how we've defined a living wage for this program. And lastly, in your application, I'll show you in a little bit here, but you'll want to just make sure that your budget is reflective of, the scale and ambition of your project. Do you want to some of those?
Yeah, some other questions that have come up that we can touch base as we talk about funding parameters and restrictions here. And this is great. You guys are starting to get more nuanced in this, in these conditions. So what exactly is an artist in residence, and can you please provide more information? An artist in residence would be an experience where you have someone who's brought into your organization or location to showcase their work or a process that is relevant to the general public, and able to reflect and able to be accessed by the general public throughout the duration of their residency. So it could look like office hours, it could look like the work being done by the artist or the product of the artist that being visible to the general public. It can culminate in a presentation to the public. There's a couple of different ways in which the relationship can be made publicly, but the idea is that you are bringing someone in who otherwise isn't there to develop a body of work or create a process that this funding can make possible. Regarding Bailey's question about can these funds be used to fund a pre-existing program? Say generally yes, if it fits the criteria here that we've outlined. And can there be a temporary installation or pop-up experience that exists for 1 to 2 days?
Well, so if it's an installation, if it's an art installation, that should be up for at least 3 months. If it's a pop-up experience, we should talk about that. What is that? I think that verbiage might just need some teasing out. So if it sounds like the pop-up experience would be more of an engaging activation rather than a static installation of art. So in that case, that sounds to me like it qualifies. But again, if it's like a static art installation, that's something that we'll want to have up for at least 3 months. Okay, so on this slide, we'll get back to the questions in just a sec, but I want to keep us moving here. So these are the things that the funding may be used for and may not be used for. So I had a question come through my email about, is this grant only for artist wages? The answer is no. There are other needs that you're going to have to support your project, whether those are marketing and communications materials, or like I said, project management and personnel costs. You might need to buy some supplies or rent some equipment. You're gonna have to have event insurance. And so these are the things that you can also put up to 10% of the funds towards hospitality. That could be like snacks while you're building the thing, or maybe you want to offer bottles of water to the folks who come and engage with you, something like that. That's all eligible. The things that you can't put this funding towards are permanent installations and mural projects. This can't be supporting a fundraising event or a fundraising effort. Religious services, capital improvement projects. So if you're gonna like make an improvement to your building facade or something like that, that's a no. Or if you're gonna like, revamp your space for intended to live on beyond the cycle of this grant, that's a no. Again, organizational administrative costs that are not directly related to this project are off the table. And then no purchasing of like a significant piece of equipment or software.
A couple of other questions related to eligibility. If we use this to fund a theater performance, are we able to pay performers for rehearsal time or just during the actual time they are performing?
Yes, pay them for their time, if that's rehearsal time or performance time.
And then we have youth who typically pay tuition. Could the grant be used to cover those tuition costs?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that specifically. Yeah, how will grantees be paid? Oh, okay, great question. So this grant is not a reimbursement-based grant. It's a milestone or deliverables-based agreement that we will have with the grantees. So we will be asking for progress reports on your project. And with those progress reports, you'll be able to send in a payment request. So the idea is that you'll be able to access the funding throughout the life of your project, not after you've already spent a bunch of your own money to make it work. Art installation of a group of folks would require more staff time paying and materials rather than pay to included artists. So wondering if that would be eligible.
It's the staff time associated with producing the event.
Yes.
Eligible.
Yes. What's a reasonable percentage of the grant award that can support staff personnel costs? Hard to say without knowing more about your proposed project. So let's follow up on that one. Restrictions around paid artists being brought into project from outside of Seattle. Well, this is City of Seattle money. So if you are proposing to bring in outside artists without employing local artists, then the panel might have issue with that, might take issue with that. So I hope that answers the question.
But I think the flip side is if you're justifying or presenting, ideas that would benefit the general public within Seattle, we would be weighing kind of the local versus outside artists accordingly.
Good. So yes, thank you.
And then last question, or last couple of questions here. How should we estimate items like insurance when it's unknown what the city will require for activation? Great question.
So it depends on how many days or hours your activation will include. If there are going to be things like bouncy houses, that's going to raise your insurance rates up. So we can't give you an estimate. We can't actually like tell you where to look for, or, suggest an insurance provider. But we can share with you, events like what you're proposing have, from what we hear from artists, the insurance cost is XYZ. I would say, yeah, it's hard to say without knowing what you're proposing, but
And that would be
we
part
can
of the,
we can talk through that with you as you're developing your proposal.
and part of the research, the external research you want to do in terms of thinking about, reaching out to vendors for an initial estimate or projection as it relates to your idea.
All right, I'm gonna just
Yeah, we're jumping on to this kind of related to eligibility. Some quick pieces that we've touched on already, though we're seeking, or folks that are eligible for this project are individual artists, organizations, or community-based groups located in or presenting work in. So you may live outside of the city center, but you're bringing work to the downtown area. And it needs to take place within the time frame of the grant, January 1st to December 25 of next year. And that says December 25th, but I think it should say December 31st. As it's through the entire calendar year. Of course, the project must be accessible to the general public and consider accessibility options and language options, in particular around admission if you're planning, accessibility in particular if you're planning to charge admission for your experience. And it must address one of the 3 focus areas that we previously touched on.
Yeah, and there's a question related to that. Do you recommend zeroing in on one focus area, or is it better to try to include all 3? It's really up to you and what's appropriate for your vision. So yeah, I wouldn't say that your proposal will necessarily score higher if you have more than one, if you're addressing more than one focus area. So no need to try to eat the whole elephant or whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah. On the next slide, we're gonna just briefly touch on what how we'll be scoring and evaluating these projects. We have a committee of peers, artists, people working in the community, working at the city, like-minded individuals who will be responsible for reviewing and ranking all of the proposals that come in. This pie chart here touches on the topics that they will specifically focus on and the scoring allocation that each of those topics is composed of. So they'll be looking broadly or specifically for how achievable is this project, what kinds of career opportunities does it provide for creative workers, do you speak to one or more of the focus areas, does it leverage, build, or restore community connection, what is the audience potential and exposure for this work, and is it also linking to or creating meaningful partnerships with downtown organizations, people, or communities. We will also be looking at kind of the overall picture of the projects as they come in to think about what the schedule and geographic distribution is. So you'll see that the tiers, the regional tiers, are not part of the scoring rubric, but it is important to us that we can present a portfolio of work in 2025 that's reasonably balanced throughout the year. If everyone wants to present work on the waterfront in July,
we're gonna have problems.
We're gonna have some problems. We'll probably have some conversations. So part of the application process actually asks you, do you have flexibility in your time and location? And that ultimately would just become a conversation as we look at finalizing kind of like the exact details of where and how your project takes place. Last, the grant timeline, just to give you a sense, it's pretty fast. So the grant will be open for just over 1 more month, closing at 5 p.m. on the 3rd. Then the grant panel will convene and review and make their selections by October. Those selections come then to the arts leadership for review and final approval, where by the end of November, we'll be able to return to all applicants with our final decision. And you'd be notified if you do receive or do not receive funds, regardless. We'll move quickly into contracting, especially with those who are looking to launch projects early in the year, and prioritize making sure we can move those that funding through quickly, so that you can start your work and kick it off in 2025. The community of practice among the awardees will also take place as we ramp up in January, and we do ask that all awardees also participate in just an internal evaluation process that helps us continually improve and refine our process year over year.
Yeah. All right. I will be demonstrating the application in just a second, but let's get through some more of the questions in the chat.
Let's see. If a fiscally sponsored org receives funding, can a portion of the funds be used to offset fiscal sponsorship? For example, the percent that goes to fees on the grant income and the rest on programming. The short answer is yes. It does not, 100% of the grant does not have to go to staffing, but and we kind of covered those areas where funds can also be used. Can you do more than one project, like a festival and a podcast? And what spaces in downtown can we use? I think if your vision includes a multi-pronged approach, pitch it. And in terms of downtown, kind of redirect you back to the sort of broad map, but in terms of a physical location, if you are seeking help identifying the physical location, that's something you're going to want to talk about in your project grant, or just contact us so we can kind of zero in on more specifics of what you're looking for. But that can be an area of how we help.
Yeah, and do you pay yourself? Do you pay yourself? Yes, please. Again, we want to see people get paid for the labor that goes into these projects. What happens to the temp installation after 3 months? The deinstall and what happens with the artwork, it would be up to you. We wouldn't be expecting any ownership or anything like that with the with what gets installed, but the deinstall plan would be something that we need to work on. We need to work out with you. If our organization receives funding from the city for programs, would that preclude us from applying for this funding? No. I will say that we tried to avoid putting multiple sources of funding towards the same project, though. So if you're receiving funding through another program, whether it's in our office or not, that is already going to support this particular project that you're hoping to get Hope Corps support on, that would be not that great. I don't want to say that's like totally out of the question, but we should talk about that.
Yeah, reach out to us.
Can you elaborate on the downtown partnerships part of the grant scoring? Who are some of the partners downtown that we can partner with? So that's up to you. If you already have like a maybe like a resident group or an arts organization or a business owner that you have been talking with about like doing some sort of block party or doing a fashion show outside of their business or something like that, we'll want to know about that. If you have experience as a resident downtown yourself, if you have volunteered or anything like that, we'll just want to know about your existing connections to downtown that you're planning on leveraging for your project.
And I would say complementary to that is if you're thinking of an idea that implies the collaboration or a relationship with an organization, your proposal will be stronger if you come to the table having developed and begun that relationship, and thought about this project in concert with their feedback and collaboration.
Yeah.
Last question in the chat, we got to the bottom. We have a variety of free programs that fit the scope of this grant. Do we need to pick one to apply with, or can we describe several to potentially work all of the related milestones?
I don't know that we can advise you on that. It really kind of depends on what you think is going to be more competitive, or what you think is going to be more feasible for you. And I think maybe it's worth a conversation to just kind of talk through the specifics of your project idea. And I think like this question and an earlier question made me want to point out that you're only able to apply once. You're only able to fill out this application one time. So if you are planning, which isn't to say that you can't apply as an individual, and also if you're the grant writer at an organization, you can't apply. That's not what I'm saying. You as an individual who has a submittable account can only submit one application. The system will not let you submit more than one. So if you wear like different hats, that's a different scenario, but just want to mention that like you're not going to be able to submit more than one project proposal. Okay. Shall I dive in? We've got 9 minutes, so I just want to make sure that I show you the application. I know there's some more questions, so I will try to make this quick. So submittable, if you're not sure how to get to this page, we can drop a bit.ly link for you that makes it super simple, or just go to seattlearts.submittable.com and you'll select this City of Seattle Hope Corps 2025 from our list of available opportunities. You'll have sort of a basic overview of the grant, but then there's a link to the guidelines, and we'll drop some links in the chat with this information. You've got some application instructions. So all the way down at the bottom of the page where it says eligibility criteria, this is the first question of the application. I should say you'll get to this once you've created a submittable account, which should be pretty straightforward. When you go to the seattlearts.submittable.com, you'll get a verification email, all that good stuff. Once you've read through the eligibility and you confirm that yes, you are eligible, that will open up the rest of the prompts in the application. So you will select, whether you're applying as an individual, group, or organization. Some of the questions are a little bit different depending on how you answer that. You put in your name, your personal name, or your group name, your organization name. Check off the artistic disciplines, the focus area. We get into questions about your preferences for downtown Seattle neighborhood. So if you know that you only want to be in one neighborhood, you have the option to tell us which one that is. If you're open to more than one neighborhood, you'll be able to check off all the ones that you're open to. And if you don't have a preference, that's cool too. You can just let us know. If you have a preference for the season, the quarter that your project would take place in, let us know that as well. Sorry, I'm kind of flying through this, but we have all of this available to you outside of the form as well. So outside of submittable, but give your project a title. It can be a working title. Project description. This is where you'll want to like share your vision with the selection panel. What's the experience going to be for those in the downtown community? What do you want the panel to know about the participating artists or creative workers? What's it going to feel like for the audience to be engaged with this? Any other details about your project concept will go here. And then we get into these questions that really relate directly to the evaluation criteria. So tell us about your community connections. Specifically, how does your proposed project uplift stories of, artists, creatives, audiences, and others who have been historically unserved or underserved? Again, your downtown partnerships, any folks that you have connections with or entities that you have connections with, how you're going to make your project accessible to the public. If you think you might need a permit, let us know that here. And then we're going to ask you to estimate how long your project will last. And that's both in the number of hours that the public will be able to engage with it and the number of days. So if it's a something that you're hoping to do every Friday of the summer or something like that, you'll put that into this larger text box. And then we also ask you to estimate, how many creative workers you're going to be employing, what your audience might, what the size of your audience might be. And then we get into the money talk. So choose your category. And then I want to get to this because it's a little bit nuanced. We ask you for this kind of narrative budget, rather than like putting together a spreadsheet or something like that. We've given you an example of how to structure this right below this big text box. So you're going to want to indicate how much money that you're requesting, and then in parentheses, what is the breakdown of how you plan to spend that money. If you're anticipating additional funding coming to support your project, you can let us know that as well. We ask you, are there any other supports that you're looking for or that you can anticipate for your project? And then we ask you for work samples. This part is very specific in terms of what constitutes a written work sample, what constitutes an image, an audio or a video work sample. And then you basically have the option to choose 2 of this bulleted list. So then it gives you some examples of what a combination of 2 of those work samples might look like. I know I'm talking really fast, but we're running out of time. So then I guess the thing to note here is that we have, because our panelists review many, many applications, we have very specific parameters around like what, how long a work sample can be, or how long. And if you don't follow these instructions, if your work sample is like 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes of audio or video, then the panel will be only looking at the first 2 minutes, or the 2 minutes from the point in the video that you specify. So, you know, you're gonna be reminded about that. There's a lot of text here, but just know, like, pay close attention to the instructions in the work sample section. Once you actually, because I haven't selected how I'm applying, I'm not seeing the demographic questions, but there will be demographic questions at the end of the application that apply to you as an individual or as an organization or group. And those are not part of the application that the panel sees. That is really just so that we as an office can understand who is applying to these funding opportunities, where can we do better outreach. And yeah, we just look at that information in aggregate, it's not connected to your application. So you can obviously save your draft, and when you're ready, hit apply. If you haven't filled things out properly, the system will notify you. Ooh, 10:59. Okay. So that's submittable.
We got there. I've been trying to also answer those questions that we haven't been able to address verbally. But in the interest of just wrapping this up before we lose you, this is my contact information. Please email me to set up a time to chat further if you have specific questions about your project. We're here to make sure your proposal is competitive and successful. So we welcome your having a conversation with you. Thank you all so much for your interest. Please share this work. Bradley, we are your champion and we're excited to see your work come to life as well. So with that, Alex, any closing thoughts?
Thank you. And yeah, feel free to reach out. And don't, if you can work on your application outside of the system, that will maybe give you some peace of mind that you'll be able to, keep your work intact. So we did provide, we have on our website and in the chat here, we'll drop the application preview so that you have all the prompts and you can start to work on your proposal, in a way that is protected or under your control a little bit. And yeah, if we didn't get to your questions, please follow up right away. And yeah, we look forward to supporting you all. Thank you.